First of all, I would like to say big thanks to Marina for putting together this great project and for making it happen. I'm also very glad to be part of this, I think, the first in-person book launch, right? My contribution, as you can also see from the title, is quite different from the rest of the edited volume, not least because I actually focused on the Belarusian female activists in the context of Russia's war on Ukraine. But I'm extremely happy that this chapter made it to this particular volume, and perhaps to also explain you why I think it's important, I will tell you the story, how the idea also was born. We've been friends on social media with Marina for some time, and I saw that she was developing this project on the gender dimensions in the context of Russia's war against Ukraine. And it's quite often forgotten, but there are 3 countries which are part of this war, actively engaged: Russia, Ukraine, but there is also neighboring Belarus. Belarus has been in a state of deep political crisis ever since the election fraud of August 9, 2020, and the violence unleashed by the Lukashenko's regime that continues in the country up until today. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has shaken Belarus a lot as well. On the one hand, the country has assumed a new role in this war that has been going on since 2014. So Belarus became a co-aggressor, as it's from the Belarusian territory that the Russian invading army moved into Ukraine in February 2022. But on the other hand, Russia's full-scale invasion also triggered unprecedented solidarity and new forms of resistance inside of Belarus, but also outside of the country among the Belarusian diaspora in Ukraine, but also in other countries of the world. So it has also transformed the nature of Belarusian female activism, which came to the forefront in the context of the 2020-2021 popular protests. You can see the results of the survey conducted by the FEM group of the Belarusian Coordination Council. It's late 2022. And with the sample of more than 1,000 Belarusian women, around 60% of them still residing in Belarus, we see that around half of them took part in some forms of protest and activism, but between a quarter and a third reoriented the activities in support of Ukraine. And I could see this also happening on the examples of some of my friends or some of the initiatives that I have been following since 2020. So I texted Marina saying that I want to tell this story. Because I think it's important also to understand, what's happening in Belarus, because the implications of Russia's war on Ukraine reverberate beyond Ukraine and have an impact on Belarus, but also on other countries in the region and the world. In my chapter, I focused on pro-Ukraine activism of Belarusian female activists. But again, it's not to say that everyone in Belarus has the same opinion on the war, and I acknowledge this as well. You can see public opinion polls, again, views on the war in 2014, but also 2022. So by and large, public opinion has remained quite divided. And even though there is strong opposition against Belarus engagement in the war, the opinion on the war is split almost equally, with around 40% supporting Ukraine. That's data from 2022, and more than 30% supporting Russia. But if you put it in a broader context, these numbers, which again should be taken with a grain of salt because of the context and so on, they are not so much different from some other Central Eastern European countries. If you take the example of Slovakia, let's say. So the key argument that I develop in the chapter is that capitalizing on the experiences, on the initiatives that were built inside and outside of Belarus in the context of 2020-2021 domestic uprising, Belarusian female activists were able to mobilize more visibly and effectively in support of Ukraine in the post-2022 period. And this stands in contrast to the period between 2014 and 2022, where we did not see this transnational solidarity. And again, Belarus is not exceptional, I guess, in this case, because we could see some new solidarity or lack of solidarity emerging in the context of other European countries and so on. And part of the explanation why there wasn't that much solidarity is also linked to the Belarusian domestic context, because many of the initiatives that were being developed, they were just shut down by the regime or had to flee and ended up in the exile and so on. But in 2020, many things appeared in the country, and so what I wanted to explore in my chapter, so what has happened to all this unprecedented mobilization and female initiatives and organizations that emerged in 2020. So to do this, I tried to tell stories of these people, basically. I focused on the personal and political trajectories of Belarusian female activists in the context of Russia's war. I relied on 3 sources of data. So the first one, just open sources, interviews on Belarusian independent newspapers, also YouTube, then data from Belarusian human rights organizations about those women who were detained, and finally interviews with some Belarusian activists, including Belarusian journalists, Belarusian human rights defenders, but also Belarusian women who are actually now part of Ukraine's armed forces and part of the Belarusian ethnic Belarusian Katsiaryna Lozka regiment. So the sort of key idea was that, of course, we do not see one coherent, huge movement formed in support of Ukraine, but it's sort of scattered around depending on where Belarusian activists are based. So I divided them into 3 groups. The first one are those people, women who are still in Belarus, because there are still some initiatives that are still there and are still active. The second one are women in Ukraine, and the third one is diaspora in other countries. And I will briefly give 3 examples of each of that, and then we could perhaps in more detail discuss if you get any questions. So the first one is women inside the country. Even though Belarus disappeared from the news, I guess completely almost, there's still quite many things going on almost every day, at least detentions, which means that something is happening as well. So we could see that those initiatives that continue to exist have transformed from inward looking, so focusing on the domestic situation or opposing Lukashenko's regime, they have transformed to more outward looking ones. Here you can see the initiative called Women with Umbrellas, which emerged in 2020, and these women used to be part of popular protests, and they joined frequently manifestations, usually with the opposition colors, white, red, white umbrellas. So that's a photo from 2022, and you can see yellow and blue umbrellas, so the colors of the Ukrainian flag, and also placards, so that clearly shows that it's not just opposition to the war, but support for Ukraine, right, which is also important because the two should be distinguished. What's also interesting is that this activism can be mostly tracked in the capital city, Minsk, but also in southern Belarus, in the Polessia region, I guess mostly because of the close ties, people-to-people contacts, family connections, and so on. These initiatives, they sort of did not develop in any big movement and so on, and they largely remained quite individualized, where just a woman who used to participate in 2020 protests would express her position against the war or in support of Ukraine and so on. But due to repressions and the whole context, we cannot claim that there is any organization or sort of initiative which is more structured that exists in the country. The second is women in Ukraine, which is a different category, I guess. Here you can see a photo of Anastasia Sever-Mahomet, who actually became, I think, the first known, at least Belarusian woman who joined the Katsiaryna Lozka regiment in Ukraine. And she had actually to fight for the right to be there because she was not allowed to join this regiment because she's a woman, she was told. So she had to first enlist in Ukraine's armed forces, and then it was a whole long process of persuading the regiment to actually accept her. So she's not the only example. So after 2022, many women tried to join the Katsiaryna Lozka regiment, but could not. But then there are many who are still undergoing training and so on in Poland and other countries. So we see a transformation, but all of the biographies that I studied and all of the activists I talked to, they all were active during the 2020 protests. So we can see a clear link between 2020 and what was happening in the post-2022 period. And also the person who I mentioned, Anastasia Mohamed, she was a student in 2020 in Belarus. She was expelled from the university for participating in the protests. but stayed in the country. And so in 2022, when Russia launched full-scale invasion of Ukraine, she decided to go and help Ukraine, because in her idea is that it's only by helping Ukraine that she can help Belarus right now, because there is not much she can do to effectively change the situation inside the country. And finally, diaspora in other countries. I think Olena was also mentioning Ukrainian diaspora, so I'll mention a bit Belarusian diaspora. Most of what was created in 2020 had to move abroad. And most of these organizations, they also reoriented the activities towards helping Ukraine. So here on the photo, again, you can see Nasta Bazar, Belarusian LGBTQI+ activist who launched also several campaigns and created organizations to help Belarusian women who were victims of police violence. So in 2020, she had to flee the country, move to Ukraine. In 2022, she moved to Poland. But from there, she also launched this campaign to help those women, Ukrainian women who were raped by Russian soldiers. So there was a campaign to fundraise for rape kits, also fundraising for psychological help and so on. So there are many things like this that have been changing in the Belarusian context as well. And that's something new, because that's something we did not really see, let's say, after 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and launched the war in the east of Ukraine. Just briefly some conclusions, but I guess that's already mentioned. So the key point is that we see some notable transformation and the emergence of this transnational solidarity link in the post-2022 period. But these women are mostly able to capitalize on those initiatives and ideas and structures that emerged in 2020. However, of course, there is a question that remains how sustainable this is and how long this will continue. But I guess it's very difficult to predict, so I will stop here.